All right, we just finished posting assignment 1, so I'm going to organize it into my folders. And then I'm going to make a new folder. I'm going to call it assignment 2, and I'm going to mark this one as green, but still yellow in the background because I still want to improve upon it, right? We can always improve upon our projects, but we got something turned in that meets requirements. So assignment 2, I am going to be inspired by this children's book character that comes from that same book I inspired my landscape from. This is the Zipper-Rumpa-Zoo. A Zipper-Rumpa-Zoo. So that's my inspiration. This is kind of my little sketch of him. I tried to do him from memory.
Why does he look like the Lorax?
He does look a lot like the Lorax.
Oh, yeah.
They have similar attributes, right? So what is assignment 2? Well, let's go to the home page and let's go to the next unit where it introduces it. Like you'll see in the course outline, it is introduced in unit 5. And we were doing concept work with the setting before. Now we're doing concept work with creature creation. To me, those are the two most fun. You can also do props, you can also do vehicles, but I like setting and creature. So creature creation, just like you had to do a fantasy concept or a fantasy landscape concept for assignment 1, that was your own vision. You have to have your own vision of a fantasy creature for this, but it's good, especially if you're new to this, not just to start with a blank page, but to be inspired by something. And just a reminder, as part of this unit, we have our second question of the day, maybe the most important question of the day of the semester, because it's the only one that has required reading, which is chapter 2. We've talked about it before, but it's going to deal with copyright, especially when you're using other people's pixels, right? So that's just an important thing to be aware of as you're continuing your compositing skills. So if we make a fantasy creature keeping the right things in mind as we composite it, we will understand its anatomy well enough that we can animate it later, which will be an option for us. So we start with a sketch, kind of a vision, and this actually kind of looks like the Zipper-Rumpa-Zoo. I realize I've already done it as a demo, but I'll do it in a totally different way this time. But what are you looking at? Well, you're looking at this little sketch. This was actually based on a Pokemon, and I made it out of a pig nose, bat ears, croc lizard eyes, gerbil hamster body, duck feet, or at least I thought I would, and then I ended up finding the reference that kind of worked. You can. So these are some past examples. Again, you're going to need a sketch and you're going to need your finished, but instead of a rectangle, this is going to be a floating PNG, and it needs to be head to toe, right? Can't be cropped off, because this is a creature we then put into our landscapes. It can be made out of all mushrooms. It can be made of all plants. It can be made of like wads of fur from the drain or hair. You can really use anything as long as it feels like it has an anatomy to it. And you can see lots of other examples. So how do you get started? Well, finding good reference is really helpful. This is one of a chameleon. It's 4,900 pixels by 3,300 pixels. Pixabay has a ton of good animal photography reference. But how do you know what you want to find? You start with your vision sketch. Pokemon are a great example because of something in character design or creature design called silhouette. So the silhouette is what is the shape of the creature in whatever pose you give it if it's just cut out of black paper. If it's just a black shape. So if you really squint, you can see that the silhouette of each and every one of these designs, and some Pokemons are better designed than others, but they really communicate the anatomy of that creature. So if you're seeing a four-legged creature, you're not seeing it from the side where you're only seeing 2 of those 4 legs. If you're seeing a creature that has a lot of expression from the front, you don't see it just straight on from the front. You always see it tilted a little bit so you get a sense of what their side also looks like. And if they're a flying creature, you see that in the anatomy, you see that in the negative shapes, so on and so forth. So they're a great thing to base your design on. Here's a great example from a past student. They were basing it on this Pokemon. They looked at the silhouette, and then they thought, okay, I'm going to sketch it, trying to understand the anatomy. Like, how does the skull attach to the spine, attach to the chest, attach to the hips, right? How long are the arms? How long are the legs? If there's a tail, how long is it? And then what kind of things can I search to composite to fill in those areas? And you get to be pretty creative, right? So I see this creature and I think, oh, I'm going to use all ice crystals. But you could also use pine cones. You could also use mountains. You can also use animals that have horns or rough hides that you cut out of. So that's the kind of idea. You need to use at least 5. You're probably going to use a lot more than 5 by the end of this. You can see a lot of instructional demonstrations. So if you want a little bit more than I'm able to record at the end of this class to help you with your sketching, just look in the playlists for assignment 2. So for this one, for instance, we have this kind of hummingbird Pokemon inspiring it. And it's made out of everything from cactus to eagles to alligators, right? All right, so how do we get started? We sketch. So I give you an example here of how to sketch through, and then we're going to build up on our sketch next class with our references, and then we're going to clean it up, put it all together. So I am going to start with my sketch. And I'm not inspired by a Pokemon this semester. I'm inspired by doing my own version of this guy that looks a little different than the one I've already done, which I think I subconsciously did. That was like 4 years ago. So, how do I sketch it? I'm going to do it digitally. So I'm just going to open up a new project in Photopea. I'm going to use the defaults. Let's just do it for, let's just do it for Instagram. So it's going to be 1080 by 1080 pixels, 72 pixels per inch. Good for a digital sketch. I recommend you guys sketch this by hand, but I'm doing it this way so that you can see it in the video. Okay, then I'm going to look at my reference, and you can have multiple references. Often I'll combine multiple Pokemon, right? And like kind of find a midway. But this is how you sketch it, which will be challenging for some of you. You're sketching it for the anatomy. So first, I'm looking for the skull. The thing that holds the brain. And instead of doing it with a lasso, I think I might as well do it with a brush. I'm going to make it pressure sensitive. I'm going to make it about 70% hardness and a size of about 40 pixels or so. Okay, so first, you draw the skull. His skull is kind of oblong and small. He has a mandible, which goes in front of the skull. It's kind of cat-like, like this. And then he has these huge eyes. Why does that help? Well, because I can immediately think, what kind of creature, like maybe a mouse, has a cranium like that? And then maybe a cat has a mandible like this. A little open mouth. And then where am I going to get this mustache from? That's really important. But that's not the anatomy. So let me stick with the anatomy first. Okay, then the spine connects with that skull. Connects at the back, just like your spine. And this one hooks down to a much bigger pelvis. Because he's kind of like fruit-shaped. Right? He's a little wider at the bottom. Then I want to draw the joints at the pelvis. And I want to figure out how these feet work. So I can see it goes down to a knee. It's a forward bending knee. And then a foot. And then the foot's there. Now this foot, I'm going to draw it a little bit differently than you see there. And I'm just going to have it out like this. So I can see that anatomy. That's going to help the silhouette. Then I can look at the shoulders. How long is the neck? The neck's about that long. The shoulders are here and here, which gives a pretty narrow rib cage. So I'm thinking hamster or gerbil. But I'm always surprised about what kind of reference I can find. And he's got, a lot of flesh on there, but I'm looking at the anatomy first. And then his arms, short, little arms. And honestly, these are like mouse arms too. Or, better yet, creatures, it's hard to find creatures that are up on their hind legs, but bears are a pretty good source for that because bears are often on their hind legs. So you can see their belly, their chest, and their arms. So that might be a good reference to use because we can warp them, scale them. Well, just like the landscape, we don't want to base it too much on one reference, right? But yeah, we could use the chest of the bear and the arms. I like to use that piece together. Keeps it strong. All right, so that's the main anatomy. And then the hands, maybe the hands come from something else. I'm going to make a new layer. I'm going to change colors here. And now we're going to look at the things that aren't part of that skeletal structure, right? And I know we're past time here, but I'm just going to take a couple minutes. So like the wings that aren't really wings, they're the ears, right? And then the belly, lots of fur and bulk right there. Then the haunches that go around the legs. So you kind of think about what creatures have these things. And then, of course, I'm going to do this in a new layer, a new color, because that mustache is its own thing. And I might think, well, maybe a walrus, or maybe just like a men's facial hair magazine to get that really crazy mustache in there. And now I'm ready to start finding reference. And when I find the reference, not only do I know what I'm looking for, I know what angle I want to find it. So these eyes, maybe I want owl eyes. But I'll know I want them from this angle. Right? And remember, we can flip them. So I'm going to do, man's mustache. Okay, and that's it. So that's what I want you to bring next class. Okay? And I'll put these videos up, and I'll help anyone that's able to stay a little later.
Sir, I have a question.
Yep.
Does a creature have to be mostly like an animal, or does it have that?
It's a fantasy creature. It's difficult to do fully humanoid creatures without clothes, right? And if you do a humanoid creature with clothes, you're just kind of compositing a human for no reason, and then putting weird stuff on the parts that aren't clothed. But you can use human parts. You can use robot parts, as long as it has a structure, right? An anatomy that we can animate.
Okay. And does it have to be based on Pokemon or RE16?
Nope. No, it can be based on just a concept you have. But let's say you wanted to do like a flying horse. It's good to look at some inspiration so you get a sense of the anatomy. Yep. And you guys know your own drawing comfort, so you can take it from there. And I'm going to help you with your sketches beginning of next class.